They never saw you coming, not because you were hiding, but because they were too loud to notice the quiet. You moved through the noise like smoke through shadows, present but never obvious. You didn't beg for attention, didn't shout your potential into rooms that weren't built to hear it. You simply watched, listened, waited. They assumed silence meant uncertainty, that because you weren't speaking, you must have had nothing to say. But silence wasn't your weakness, it was your weapon. While they were performing, you were preparing. While they boasted, you studied their patterns. Every fake smile, every flex, every attempt to assert dominance was just another data point. You didn't challenge it. You didn't correct them. You let them believe they were winning. And in doing so, you stayed underestimated, invisible, untouchable. Because the truth is, people don't notice power until it makes them uncomfortable, until it shifts the balance without asking for permission. That's when they start to feel it, the weight in the room when you walk in, the way conversations change, the way silence suddenly becomes the loudest thing they hear. They thought you were quiet because you lacked confidence, but now they're starting to wonder if you were quiet because you already knew how this ends. They started noticing it slowly, subtle things, the way people leaned in when you spoke, even if you only said a few words, the way you didn't need to raise your voice to own the room. While others performed, you held still. While they filled the air with empty noise, your silence created tension. You became the pause between chaos, the breath no one knew they were holding. At first, they laughed it off, called you reserved, shy, passive, but deep down they felt it. Your stillness wasn't uncertainty, it was presence. You weren't hiding. You were calculating, and that realization came with a quiet kind of fear, because people like you don't ask for permission. You don't play politics or chase validation. You move differently. You wait until the moment is right, and then you change everything, without warning, without noise, without effort. That's what separates you from them. They need to be seen to feel powerful. You only need clarity. You stopped reacting long ago. That was the first shift. The moment you realized not every insult deserves a response, not every challenge deserves your attention, you learned that restraint is control, that silence is more commanding than shouting could ever be. And now, the same ones who mocked your quietness can't stop watching you. They try to mimic your calm, your mystery, your presence, but it doesn't work. Because what you have can't be faked. It was earned in silence, forged in stillness, sharpened through years of watching everyone else burn themselves out. There's a moment when silence stops being misunderstood and starts being feared, not because you changed, but because they finally caught up. They begin to notice what they missed while they were too busy talking. The way you don't flinch, the way you don't explain, the way you hold eye contact just long enough to say everything without saying a word. You've become the anomaly in their pattern, the one they can't read. You don't overreact, overshare, or overcompensate. You don't chase drama. You eliminate it by simply not feeding it. And that's when they realize your silence isn't empty. It's full of judgment, full of decisions, full of intent. And nothing makes people more uncomfortable than not knowing where they stand with someone who no longer needs them to. They used to try to trigger you, push buttons, get a rise. They relied on you needing to explain yourself, needing to be understood, but that need is gone now, and so is their power, because the person who doesn't speak unless it matters holds the sharpest voice in the room. And now they're adjusting, choosing their words more carefully around you. They don't interrupt like they used to. Their jokes are softer. Their eyes glance toward you more often, just checking, because they can't tell what you're thinking, and that bothers them more than anything. You never asked to be feared. You just refused to be dismissed, and that made all the difference. They thought they knew you. They built a version of you in their minds. Someone quiet, someone soft, someone they could overlook. But that version was never real. It was projection, comfort. They needed you to be small so they could feel big. They needed you to stay silent so their noise could seem important. But now, the illusion is breaking. You haven't said a thing, and yet everything is shifting. People they once ignored you in front of now ask for your input. The same voices that used to talk over you now pause when you breathe. Your presence has become weight, and in a world obsessed with volume, you've become gravity. It's not just that you're silent, it's that you've become selective. What you give your attention to, who you acknowledge, what you respond to, that's what separates those in control from those seeking it. You no longer speak to be heard, you speak to move, and when you don't speak, you still move people. The funny thing is, you never tried to take control. You didn't chase it, you didn't fight for it. You just built yourself while they were busy performing. You became undeniable while they were trying to be seen. And now the room shifts around you, not because you demand it, but because you've earned it. Control doesn't always arrive with a crown. Sometimes it arrives with a stare, a stillness, a refusal to participate in things beneath you. That's what you've mastered. They used to confuse movement with progress, talking with thinking, loudness with leadership, and in that noise, they never stopped to ask who was actually listening. But you did. You always did. You watched them burn themselves out, proving things you never cared about. You let them wear themselves thin, chasing validation you never needed. And while they were addicted to being seen, you fell in love with being underestimated. You learned that when people don't expect anything from you, they expose everything to you. You saw their insecurities behind their confidence, their desperation behind their pride, and while they flaunted strength, you built it quietly, deliberately. You didn't need an audience. You needed discipline. That's why you walk differently now. Not with arrogance, but with certainty. Not with noise, but with presence. And they feel it, even if they don't have the words for it. Something in you doesn't move like it used to. You're not tense. You're not timid, you're not waiting for permission, you're just already there. And now that they're waking up to it, they don't know how to engage, because the tools they once used, mockery, pressure, dominance, they don't work anymore. You've evolved past their reach, and that scares them. Because they can't control someone who doesn't need their attention. They can't threaten someone who's already faced silence and turned it into strength. And most of all, they can't ignore someone who no longer needs to speak to be seen. If you move in silence, subscribe and stay unseen where real power grows. You didn't plan on being above them. That was never the goal. But when you stopped chasing, you started rising. And the higher you went, the quieter it got. Because real power doesn't live where the noise is, it lives where clarity is, where you can see everything, every weakness, every false move, without having to say a word. They don't know how to function around that. They're used to chaos, to emotional reactions, to people trying to prove themselves. But you offer none of that. You offer stillness, and that stillness reflects back everything they've been trying to hide. Now, they look to you for how to behave. They mimic your tone, copy your rhythm, study your restraint like it's a language they don't speak. But what they don't realize is this wasn't learned in a day. This was built in the dark, shaped in silence, refined through rejection, isolation, and every moment you swallowed words because they weren't worth wasting. You don't need the spotlight. You are the gravity that pulls attention without effort, and they feel it. When you enter, when you leave, when you simply remain still while the world around you rushes to be heard. That's the thing about control. It doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it doesn't even declare itself. It just is. And now, so are you. Control didn't make you louder, it made you quieter. Because now, you know, the ones truly in charge don't need to raise their voices. They don't waste energy convincing others. They don't defend themselves in rooms where they were never understood to begin with. They simply move, quietly, with intention, with precision, and what scares them the most is that you stopped reacting entirely. They try to provoke, and you blink. They try to challenge, and you breathe. They expect confrontation, but you give them stillness, and that disarms them faster than any scream ever could. You've become unpredictable, not because you changed your behavior, but because you stopped participating in theirs. Your presence now carries weight. It speaks before you do. It demands nothing, yet commands everything. Because you've taught people, without ever saying it, that your time, your focus, your energy are sacred. Not everyone gets access, and those who lost it feel it in your silence louder than they ever did in your words. This is the evolution they never saw coming. Not louder, not meaner, just clearer, and clarity is power. Because when you're clear on who you are, you no longer bend. You no longer explain. You no longer chase peace in places built on noise. You become the constant in a room full of chaos, and that constancy makes you untouchable. You stopped walking into rooms hoping to be liked. You started walking in knowing you didn't need to be. That shift was everything, because once you stop depending on external validation, you become immune to manipulation. You see things clearer, you sense intention, you feel energy before a single word is spoken, and they don't know what to do with someone who sees through everything. They used to think silence was passive, but your silence is surgical. It's precise. You don't speak to be heard. You speak to hit. One sentence, clean, controlled, can do more damage than their entire tantrum because your words are earned, and that gives them weight. They've noticed that. The way their chaos no longer gets a rise out of you. The way their games fall flat because you refuse to play. You've become the void they can't control. And what they fear most is that you've grown stronger in the places they tried to break you. You're not angry anymore. You're aware, and awareness is lethal. You've seen too much, felt too much, and now you carry it, not like a burden, but like armor, silent, heavy, unshakable. You used to explain your intentions, now you just act. You used to fear their opinions, now you see their insecurities. You used to try to keep the peace, now you are the peace, because you've cut away everything that disrupts it. You don't need to raise your voice. You are the echo that stays after everyone else has finished talking. By the time they realize what you've become, it's already too late. You're not the same presence they once overlooked. You're the one they now monitor, observe, calculate around, not because you asked for it, but because your stillness reshaped the room. Your silence rewrote the rules. You no longer chase clarity from others because you found it in yourself. You no longer seek peace from those who profit from your unrest. Instead, you've built a state of inner stillness they can't shake, no matter how loud they get. And in that stillness you've made your move, not outward, but inward. You sharpened, you aligned. You became the storm wrapped in control. They try to provoke the old version of you. They throw the same jabs, but they land on armor now. You don't even flinch. You don't even blink, because the real shift wasn't in how you respond. It was in how deeply you no longer need to. That's the mark of someone who owns the game. You don't waste time proving you've changed. You prove it by never stepping backward again. You've stopped giving warnings, stopped offering explanations. Your presence alone is the final word, and still they wait for you to break your silence, to lash out, to explode, because they're used to drama, to escalation, to weakness disguised as rage. But you just stand there, unshaken, uninterested, untouchable, because silence wasn't the strategy, it was always the truth. You've become the presence they can't ignore, the one they once underestimated, now the one they measure themselves against. You didn't ask for attention, you never had to, because true power doesn't arrive with applause, it walks in quietly and changes everything. Now they tread carefully around you, their laughter is forced, their words filtered. They test the air before speaking, not because you intimidate with aggression, but because you represent something more dangerous: discipline, detachment, control. You've become a reminder of everything they couldn't become. You didn't need to be louder, flashier, or more dramatic. You needed to be unshakable. And now you are. You don't interrupt anymore. You don't chase closure. You don't explain who you've become. You let the silence speak for itself, and it speaks volumes. It tells them you've already left their world behind, that you no longer seek permission to be powerful, that you are no longer reacting, because now you're choosing. And the most terrifying part for them, you didn't just survive the noise, you outgrew it, quietly, relentlessly, permanently, because the ones who walk silently are the ones who never have to walk back.